Good afternoon. I don't know about all of you, but I've had a great day so far listening to dozens of amazing guest speakers. I don't really want to prevent you guys from speaking straight away. So what I'm going to do, just to save time, is I'm going to just jump straight in to our discussion topic today, which is aptly named A Tale of Sustainability and Gastronomy. I have with me four esteemed speakers who are experts in their fields, ranging from bean growing to canning and analysis. Our first speaker is the co-founder and the managing partner of Zimonski & Co., and he'll be joining us virtually from Hamburg. Joachim Schlange will be discussing the European market study and the EU Green Deal. So please put your hands together and welcome Joachim to the stage.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and good morning to Medellin and to all the participants of BeanCon23. I'm based in Hamburg. I would have preferred to be with you guys, but that wasn't possible, unfortunately. So it's 8 o'clock in the evening here. I would like to thank the organizers of BeanCon very much for inviting me, and in particular, the Richmond, who had the idea to have me speak. So I have 10 minutes to talk about the European market study and the EU Green Deal. Next, please. Next slide. I don't know. I have no idea if that's on the screen or not.
It is.
It is. So let's start with the European market study. It took a little longer than we all thought, but I think the results are pretty good. As a matter of fact, we sent out a slide deck of 333 pages to the US Dry Bean and Lentil Council and the US Dry Bean Council. Unfortunately, it took a little longer, as I said. We would have loved to show you some of the results. Next slide, please. I have no idea what slide is on. Is it page 3, by any chance?
Study focusing on 4 European plus additional.
One earlier, please. One earlier, please. No. Go back one slide. Okay, wonderful. Go. So briefly, SNZ, that's for Schlange and Zimonski & Co. We are a sustainability consultancy with offices in Hamburg, Germany, and in New York. And well, we are very happy that we have been awarded with the study by the two councils. It is about the perception in Europe on sustainability of pulses. So by the, what does the general public, what is it that consumers believe, what is the perception, what is that industry partners think, and policymakers. What is it what they think about sustainability value of US grown pulses? So the overall objective is to correct, what the council think is a misconception of US produced food concerning sustainability. So based on what we have found out, the idea is then to, think about the marketing and communication strategy for promoting US pulses in Europe, and in particular to explain the benefits of US pulses, the high degree of sustainability and their low carbon impact. So we have, as I said, completed it today, and the approach, was based on a lot of desk research, but also consumer survey and the discussion with relevant stakeholders. Next, please. So the focus of our study, we started out with 5 countries. The original countries, as you can see here, in alphabetical order: France, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, Spain, and the UK. So all except for UK, EU countries. We then discovered, that we had good contacts along the value chain in additional countries. Algeria, North Africa, not Europe, obviously, in Germany, in Hungary, and in Sweden. And we said, since we know these people and we met them during our study time, or rather the time of our project, let's include them. It broadens the perspective. We have, Northern European countries, Southern European countries, Eastern European countries. That is very helpful for our study, and that's what we did. Next, please. So the market study is basically now, again, as it's been sent out, divided into, say, 9 chapters. It's a consumer survey, and I will show you what we asked. Expert interviews, so the participants along the value chain. What is it that we learned, about EU and country policies on farming and on pulses? Very important. What do NGOs and NPOs, non-governmental and non-profit organizations, think about sustainability, about farming, agriculture, and the benefits of pulses? We were able to speak to retailers in 6 or 7 countries, I think. Very interesting, very difficult to reach them. But once you have them in a meeting, there is a lot of information that comes out. We also looked at what do other export nations do that, trade with Europe. How is their communication? How is their marketing approach? Is there something that that the US councils can possibly learn? So we looked at Canada, we looked at Argentina, Mexico, Turkey, Russia. Obviously, there is not much. Ukraine, there's not much either, due to the terrible war that is happening. We looked at how are pulses being treated, dealt with in media, be that day-to-day, media, be that particular trade-oriented media, and also social media. Those who talk about pulses, talk about other foods. That's the next chapter. Best practice examples in marketing. We looked at we asked the participants along the value chain, what are best practice examples here? And a lot of food came up. We call them superfoods. There are certain superfoods. And the question is, what can we possibly learn and how they, draw up a profile and promote that? And the final issue that we dealt with was the possibility of a sustainability standard for pulses. A lot of agricultural products do have such standards. We all know the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. There is something for sustainable soy. Almonds have that. And so we asked the participants along the value chain whether or not that would be useful. Next, please. So the consumer survey, we completed that in the 5 core countries. Again, it's France, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, and the UK. And we had a total of 1,500 respondents that is equally distributed, so 300 in each. It worked very well. So we asked about their eating habits, about, how often do they consume pulses? In what kind of form do they do it? How do they buy pulses? Do they have particular purchasing criteria? Do they know about sustainability? And does it play any role when buying pulses at all, or, deciding between pulses and other food? And if so, are there any particular aspects in terms of sustainability that they would, consider? Is the origin of the pulses of any importance? And do they know about the attributes of pulses? I think the previous panel had discussed this. And finally, we asked, is there any interest? Again, these are the questions we asked consumers. Is there any interest for more information now, in particular with regard to US pulses? These were the main questions. There are 2 or 3 other questions, I think, that we asked. Very interesting answers. Again, I'm unfortunately not able to give you any results, but I guess that once we have discussed the results with the two councils and this has been vetted, that we can send this out. Next slide, please. So with regard to our expert interviews, we were able to complete 40 of them in the countries that I had mentioned before, in the 9 countries. So these were traders, importers, these were processors, yeah, of course, food retail. We cannabis as well, as you can see here. But in addition, we said, let's look at others, like, trade organizations. We were able to talk to politicians at EU level, as well as country level. Not the easiest thing in the world, because they are always sort of, very careful in what they're allowed to say or not. We spoke to science, to universities, to institutions, research institutions, and as I had mentioned before, non-governmental organizations and non-profit organizations. So the questions were, this is just a selection. So we started with the overall importance of sustainability and in particular pulses. We then asked, what are the critical sustainability issues in agriculture? We had about, I think, 12 topics that included nitrogen fixation, water use, soil health, carbon footprint, these sort of things. We asked, what are the most important criteria when sourcing? Is it price? Is it quality? Or is it sustainability? And if so, what is it that you are really looking for there? What were the drivers of sustainability in each of these particular, or each of these 9 countries? Who's pushing the issue? Is it the consumer? Is it politics? Is it NGO? The retailer? The trader? Very different answers. As I had mentioned before, we wanted to know whether or not an industry standard for pulses, sustainability standard, would be of any help, would be useful for, increasing the volume. What do people know about US pulses? Is there any bias of US agricultural products? And then a whole range of questions with regard to what would you like to know about US pulses, and in particular with regard to sustainability, and who should disseminate this, right? What are the sources? Next, please. So again, we completed the research. We sent it out today. What is interesting, what I can say is there is not a lot of difference between the answers we got, the perception, be that from the north, UK or Sweden, down to Italy, Spain, and even Algeria. Pulses is a product that people like a lot. I can tell you that, and that is not a surprise. The question is, to what extent does sustainability play a role? And that is a good connection now to the next chapter, which is about the EU Green Deal. Next slide, please. So I don't know how many of you have a good idea about the European Union. 27 countries. It was founded basically after World War II. It was France and Germany that said, listen, we cannot continue having wars, 2 or 3 wars each and every century. Let's, trade. Let's try and build confidence by just trading. And the old saying was, who does trade doesn't fight. This is also why we as Germans bought gas from the ex-Soviet Union and now Putin, but that philosophy doesn't hold anymore. Anyways, so the original trade union has now become an organization that deals with a whole lot of issues, climate, environment, health, external relations, migration, justice, etc. It is an economic engine the single market, and it's the largest in the world, as a matter of fact. So it's a very good, I guess, idea and organization. It has been around for decades now, and I think we wouldn't want to do without it. Although there are enormous differences in economic power between North and South. So the numbers below show you we have something like 450 million inhabitants in the European Union as compared to 330 million in the US. But the US is much more powerful. GDP is 25 billion versus 16 in Europe. Next, please. So in late 2019, Ursula von der Leyen, the EU commissioner who had just started her job, announced the EU Green Deal. It is, it's a massive undertaking. Sustainability is very, very important, high priority in Europe, and it's being pushed at the EU level, but also obviously at national level with differences between the countries. But we want to be net zero rather sooner than later, and we are very careful about biodiversity, about good food, healthy food, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to become carbon neutral by 2050, but nobody is happy with that. 2040 is rather achievable, we all believe. If it's doable, it's another question. We want to protect human life, animals and plants, so the topic of biodiversity. We want to help companies to become world leaders in clean products, and it all supposed to be just an inclusive transition. Now, the US has responded by the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a very, very powerful tool to become number one in terms of clean technology. So this is quite a competition that's going to happen. Next, please. So, no, next, please. Right. So we have 9 policy areas, and you see the 3 on the left top side. That's about agriculture. Biodiversity, an extremely important topic in Europe. It's farm to fork, and it is sustainable agriculture. All the others have more or less to do with energy, with pollution, emission, climate change. Next, please. So what it's all about, it's farm to fork strategy. We want to accelerate the transition, to become neutral or, have a positive environmental impact, to mitigate the climate risk. Again, biodiversity, to reduce it as much as possible, but also to ensure food security and to preserve the affordability of food. So some of these, objectives are contradictory. It is easier said than done because, now because of the Ukraine war, prices are going up. You feel that in Latin America as well as we do in the United States and here. So we have to see how this all works out. Next, please. I think I have to hurry up a little bit. So the EU proposal for sustainable food system, the objective is to make the food system sustainable and to integrate sustainability in all policies. So, by and large, the consumption of pulses in the EU is expected to increase dramatically over the next 10 years by more than 50%. We aim to have the share of organically farmed land to increase continuously. Many countries have an EU plant protein strategy that is being pushed through. I will show you in I think it's the next slide or the last slide. But there are obstacles, right? There is a non-optimal economic conditions in Europe. We are not in the position today, and I don't know if that will happen in the future, to grow a sufficient amount of pulses on our own, which is a good chance for all export countries to continue or increase their share of export to the EU. And next slide, and I think it's my last slide. Here you see, and I will run through this, you see that UK, the Netherlands, Italy, Germany, and Spain, they all have their sustainable farming incentives, policies, that are in line, with each country's sustainability strategy and under the roof of the EU Green Deal. I'm not going to go through this all individually because I think I've already taken much more time than I've been allocated. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Thank you for joining us in your outside office. Is that where you are right now?
Yeah, good question. I'm a farm boy. I grew up on a farm in northern Germany, which you see here. That was taken in I don't know, September last year or so. Now I'm warm and cozy. Thanks for the question.
That's good. Very much looking forward to hearing the results as well from the study. Super interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next guest speaker is a dry bean specialist hailing from Michigan State University. He conducts extensive research around the state of Michigan, focusing on all aspects of dry bean production. So please welcome Scott Bales.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So I do recognize that it is 2:30 after a wonderful lunch in a dark room. And now I'm the guy that's going to talk about crop physiology. So I'll try to keep it light, keep you guys entertained, and we'll try to move along the best we can. So I know a few familiar faces in this room, but a lot of new faces too. I always find it helpful to know a little bit about who we're listening to, so I got a quick introduction for you guys. So once again, my name is Scott Bales. I work for Michigan State University out of the College of Ag and Natural Resources. In my current appointment there, I have a 50% research and 50% extension or outreach appointment. So half the time I'm conducting very applied on-farm agronomic research with farmers, and the other half of the time I'm telling farmers about it. And I would say about 99% of the time I'm grower-facing, working with our stakeholders. And this would be the 1% of the time where we've got a bit of a mixed crowd, consumers, dealers, the other side of the coin. So I like to say that my focus in this role is really sustainability. And I'm not just saying that because we're here today talking about sustainability. I truly believe it. And I kind of believe in this approach to agriculture as both environmental and economic sustainability for our farmers. Because long term, when we think about family succession, as most of our farms in the state of Michigan are family farms, when we're thinking 4, 5, 6 generations down the pipeline, we need to be taking care of our natural resources, the farms that we have, to leave them in better shape for our children and our children's children, than we may have received them. And if we do that and take care of our environment, that's something that in the long run is going to provide economic return for us. And the approach I take to that within my research appointment is a lot of genetic testing and improvements. So in dry beans in North America, we are a non-GMO crop. So we work with wonderful dry bean breeders, all in conventional breeding programs, testing genetics within the state of Michigan for what may be adaptable and improved varieties for our growers. And then also we work on a lot of improvements in our production practices. So when we think of seeding, row widths, tillage programs, all those things that go into actually producing a crop, how can we do them better? So you'll notice I do have a couple pictures up here of bean production, but I also have a few pictures of me and my family enjoying the outdoors in Michigan. That's something that we are deeply devoted to and like to take a hand in protecting our environment and the resources we do have. So we'll go into a quick overview of dry bean, common bean or Phaseolus vulgaris. It's a short-seasoned leguminous food crop. When we say short-seasoned, we're talking 90 to 100 days, so a very quick growing season for us. We have a smaller carbon footprint than alternative crops, and we also have very low soil nutrient requirements compared to some of our other competing crops in rotation. And we like to say it's a really nutrient-dense food with post-harvest stability, that we've heard about a lot in today's program. So we call it leguminous crop. So that's really important when we talk about this really unique aspect of legume biology and symbiotic nitrogen fixation. So the room we're in right now, the air we're breathing is about 78% atmospheric nitrogen. If we remember back to science class, nitrogen is a building blocks of proteins and an essential macronutrient, for plant growth. However, as a general rule, atmospheric nitrogen is not available to plants. However, legumes, through a process of incredible evolution and selection, when you think of it, have developed a unique relationship with rhizobacteria, that are naturally present in our soils where we're producing dry beans. And if they have not been produced, we can provide inoculants to make sure that that bacteria is there to form a partnership. And those bacteria latch on to our roots, and they take atmospheric nitrogen, and they transform them into a usable form for the plant. So it's really amazing when you really think about it. And that, in turn, is one less input that we need to supply to the crop. So if we took it, we said they're efficient. We just talked about nitrogen. So now we're going to look at, them compared to some other crops in our rotations. And we have corn and soybean posted up here, not as an enemy, but just as a reference. And what we have is pounds per acre of macronutrients. Nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus are actual crop removal for an average crop. I used average Michigan yields here, but it's a basis that we can look at across North America. So if we specifically look at dry beans, we're using about 75 pounds of nitrogen for an average crop. The important thing there, we're a legume, so we do not need to apply this whole 75 pounds to that crop. So that's a really benefit to our system. The same would go for soybeans, where you see that really high number of 191 pounds of nitrogen. Soybeans are also a legume, so that's really helping our system there with that symbiotic nitrogen fixation. Now we'll scroll over to potassium and phosphorus there as we look at. For dry beans, we're using about 25 pounds of phosphorus and 34 pounds of potassium. If we compare that to corn, 64, 47, soybeans, 40, and 70. So we're really a low input crop, a food crop with that stability on efficient users of the macronutrients that we do have in our system. So, and why is that important? Everybody's probably heard about eutrophication of some of our water systems. Coming from Michigan, this is really important to us. We showed those pictures of us, fishing on the Great Lakes. It's a resource we really want to protect. Unfortunately, years back, this is a photo of Lake Erie, where you can see this eutrophication or algae blooms that can cause anoxic conditions for our fish in that system. And that production agriculture, unfortunately, can influence that through additional nitrogen or nitrates entering our water system or phosphorus. That can kind of happen in two ways. Nitrogen is a mobile nutrient, so it can move through our soil process, and exit with our wastewater that leaves the field, or excess water that heads into our ditch and makes its way into the lakes. Phosphorus, it binds very tightly to the soil, so most times when we get phosphorus into a water system, it's actually from erosion. So soil particulates from our farm actually leave the farm and end up in our water system. So two things we really want to avoid in production agriculture. Where dry beans come in, once again, symbiotic nitrogen fixation. We don't have to apply a ton of nitrogen to our dry beans. That's one less input we have there to worry about in our water quality. And phosphorus, very low phosphorus users. So oftentimes in Michigan, when we look at our soil test, we don't need to apply any additional phosphorus to our soils, for average dry bean production. So, we talked about nutrients. Now let's talk about water. We touched on it a little bit, but we'll get a little bit deeper into it. So I pulled this graph out of a publication out of Nebraska that showed water use efficiency of dry beans and actually how much water they need, by growth stage throughout the year. So for us, this is quite common. Planting date in June, harvest in September. You can see that our graph peaks as we come along. In through mid-July and August, we have peak water use in dry beans. That's when they're growing the most. They're vegetative. They're flowering. And we start to set pods. And we see we use about 3/10 of water per day, 3/10 of an inch of water per day, which equates to about 2 1/4 inches per week, at that peak use. If we compare, we add all that up, once again, for an average type yield, and our total amount of water needed per season compared to some other rotational crops, you see how little water dry beans can get by on, compared to some of our other longer season crops in the system. Now, a lot of our Michigan production is rain-fed, so you may say, well, this isn't particularly important. It's going to rain anyways, so if the crop uses it or not, that water is going to fall. But when we do talk about irrigation, that really comes into play, that we can get by with pulling less irrigation water from our underground aquifers, for dry beans, compared to crops like soybean, corn, sugar beet, or sunflower. So, that was our quick overview of some of our crop physiology. Now we'll talk about some of the things that our farmers are doing on farm. And I'll call this, our best practices, or things that are, widely implemented, across North America that our producers are currently doing. First one would be minimum tillage practices. A lot of the places that we do plant dry beans, the soil conditions are not conducive for no-till agriculture. The soil is too heavy, it's too wet, and too cold, or too far north. So that soil has to be tilled to warm it up for economic returns on driving production. But the solution that a lot of our farmers have had to help, really limit erosion, and some of these other water quality issues we have are, what we call minimal till practices. So really being strategic about how and when we till, keeping soil residue on top of the soil to help protect those resources we have from wind, water, and to keep that, soil on our farm. And that comes in with our erosion mitigation practices as well. You'll see here we have a grass waterway. So you can see this is a slope down from each side. If you get a heavy rain, you're gonna have water that comes down to that ditch. If you leave that grass waterway in there, it's gonna help hold that soil, filter that soil for potential nutrients that would be leaving that farm, and keep them on the farm rather than in our waterways. Other key practices we have are a practice we call integrated pest management. Some might know this simply as IPM. So that's really looking at our pest management as a systems approach. So utilizing things like biological predators to control pests. Using our crop protection products as a last resort. So using things like cropping rotations to help mitigate the pest pressure we have, and using our tools as wisely as we can. And then also cover cropping. So there's been an excellent amount of work done through the universities and private researching on cover cropping, where the goal is to really have a living root in our soil 12 months out of the year. We come from somewhere where the soil can be froze anywhere from 3 to, my friends in North Dakota might say 6 months a year. So that can be challenging. But we're increasing our practices, and it's becoming more and more common to have cover cropping in these systems to keep that living root in the soil as long as we can. If we can be growing something, we should be growing something. And then the thing I kind of geek out on a little bit is technology. So when we get into sustainability and we talk about technology, the future is exciting. One thing that a lot of our farmers are doing is variable rate applications. So that's treating each square meter of a field special. So that's really understanding what nutrients are there, what nutrients need to be there, and nourishing that soil accordingly on a square meter by square meter basis. You can see the map we have here up in the top right. This would be a very common application map that we might have. So that's combining information from soil tests as well as our yield potential of that farm, generating a map that then we can go out and spread our fertilizer based on. So every square meter of that farm gets exactly what it needs, no more, no less. And that's a similar practice that's also done for seeding. And it's something that's coming for the world of weed control too, which I think is quite exciting. And then there's the topic of drones. Drones have been extremely popular in precision agriculture, and they definitely have a future. I think we're still figuring out where exactly they do fit, but they're definitely a tool we're going to take advantage of, whether it be for simple crop scouting, covering more ground per day to be able to understand what pests we do have, or some are using them for actual pest control and observation. We'll circle back to drainage a little bit. So a lot of our farms do have a system of tile drainage. We have a unique problem where sometimes a year we have more water than we need in our farms, and other times we don't have as much. So we have tile drainage systems that help drain excess water off those fields so we can perform activities without causing compaction, such as planting and harvesting. But there's been some work done on these drainage systems, looking at what our nitrate levels are leaving those farms. So we talked about nitrogen. It's a mobile nutrient. It can leave through water. So oftentimes we're testing the water that's coming out of our drainage systems, and you'll find that it has nitrates in it, which is not good. So there's been some different systems developed, such as controlled drainage systems and bioreactors that can actually help mitigate the effect of that nitrate, basically using the nitrogen cycle to bring that back into atmospheric nitrogen prior to leaving the farm. So it's a really cool technology that I think is definitely a part of the future of agriculture in North America. And then this is a really neat picture. This is from John Deere. So this is a new technology they have. It's called See and Spray, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So this is using AI, precision technology, to actually see weeds in the field. So this is a way of actually only using that crop protection product, or in this case, a herbicide, exactly where it's needed. So you're not spraying anywhere that there's not a weed. This actually allows a sprayer to drive across that field, only see the particular weeds, and only meter out the exact amount of herbicide needed to kill that in particular weed. So really bringing our pesticide use even lower than what we're already at. And then my conclusion slide we have here, it's a little bit busy, but the message is simple. So we have USA total production on our first axis here, in 100 weights per acre. for almost the past 100 years. So you have years across the bottom, and then we have our cultivated acres in North America, USA, on our second axis, which is represented by these bars and the lighter green line we have here. So relatively, if you look across the past 100 years, our acres are going up, but slightly. Now, the more interesting line we have is yield. You know, if we follow that darker green line that comes up and is actually fitted to an exponential curve, you'll come to find that our USA producers are producing exponentially more beans on a near static land base every year. So I think this is really exciting about the future of sustainability for North American cropping systems. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time.
That's great. Thank you very much, Scott. I like the look of the See and Spray, the sort of image detection machine. How does tech like that sort of improve sustainable farming practices?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And as I mentioned, I personally believe that technology is going to be a part of the future of agriculture and how we can improve the sustainability. So we're already using, super low rates, controlled rates of our crop protection practices, but using AI and imagery and things like that, it's going to allow us to even use that much less, which we often talk about the expense of some of these technologies, but they make economic sense in the long run. As we talk about, if we can use less products, which are not cheap, it's going to allow our farms to be more profitable and more sustainable.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Our next guest speaker is the co-owner and president of a Chippewa Valley Bean and Durant family-owned agricultural business that grows, processes, and markets kidney beans. Please welcome Cindy Brown.
Thank you.
There you go.
I'll let you.
Of course.
I didn't practice with the clicker, so here we go. Just a couple of things. This is our video on sustainability, and I think there's volume that goes with it.
I think they're loading it up on the main screen.
Very good. So what I wanted to say is Doan Limited is the farming operation, and we've been growing kidney beans since my dad started in 1969. But as we see this, you're going to see an area where we're practicing what Scott just talked about. Maybe.
There it is.
Here we go.
There's a lot of conversations happening now amongst our ag systems and actually our whole production systems on sustainability and stewardship of the land. Now, I maintain that we as an ag system generally have been very much on top of that for years because we are trying all the time to produce things, have longevity for our next generations and so on. And as we move forward on that, and as we look at the compromises on our bottom line that we can see many times as we try and do different management tools, that how are we as a society able to then come along and pay for that or understand that that's going to raise our cost as we come up and do that, even though it may have in some of our minds a very good long-term realization we can have.
Chippewa Valley Bean has a great team of agronomists with expert knowledge in growing dry edible beans. We also have the ability to work with our growers and diagnose any issues that they may be having out in the field.
Yeah, we should look at some of the NDVI images from the satellite and see if we can't pick up low spots in the field.
One of the most sustainable things about growing kidney beans is that we have an early harvest window. Therefore, we can get a cover crop planted in late August or early September, and it allows enough time for this crop to get established. What I mean by that is, let's say your bean crop did not suck up all the nitrogen that was in the soil for the year. The cover crop has the ability to recycle that and then make it available the following season to the next crop.
Nice root development through here. Actually, it's holding the soil together really well.
Practices we do in the field for regenerative agriculture, we like to coin a phrase that whenever something can be growing, something should be growing. So regenerative ag takes on many meanings. Ultimately, continuously recycling, there's no waste. Whatever you do use, or if there's a waste, that waste is recycled into another product. Some of it's probably herbicide, but it does look like we might have some bacterial blight.
Some nitrogen deficiencies.
in the end, there's less or no environmental impact. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to regenerate everything that you do to benefit another process.
What is Chippewa Valley Bean doing to be more sustainable? We are currently working in partnership with our farming arm, Doan Limited, to develop 2,000 acres of solar power generation in our own fields. In addition to the generation of power, this would also mean that 2,000 acres of land will be seeded with pollinator grasses, hopefully combating the reduction of bee and butterfly populations, as well as allowing the soil to regenerate for several decades. We've worked with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to restore a section of the Chippewa River bank to control water runoff. In addition, we installed stormwater retention ponds on the plant site to control runoff. This also allows for settling of particulate matter and for water clarification prior to discharge. Firefighters will pump out the ponds if there's ever a fire on site. In the design of our new distribution center, the idea of sustainability was always a consideration. From large windows to allow natural light, to high-efficiency LED lighting, to the loading dock doors that were specifically chosen because they reduce the heat lost in winter and reduce the amount of cooling needed in the summer. The selection of our new tote racking system not only reduced the footprint of the building, but allows us to get the totes up off the floor. This eliminates 350,000 square feet of plastic barrier on an annual basis. Some major changes that we've made have involved our fleet of lift trucks. A big step was purchasing 4 electric lift trucks. This eliminated 4 that ran on fossil fuels. By doing this, we're saving 15,000 gallons of natural gas per year. We also installed a semi-automatic tote filling machine, which completely eliminated the need for one fossil fuel truck that ran 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, 52 weeks per year, saving 11,200 gallons of natural gas as well. Another way we've been able to make significant changes is through simple facility upgrades. By installing a bulk LP tank, we've eliminated 185 delivery truck runs, saving over 13,000 road miles annually. The installation of a bulk diesel fuel tank reduced diesel delivery miles by 80%. By simply redesigning our traffic flow pattern, we've reduced on-site truck travel by over 3,000 miles every year. We've installed parking lot charging outlets to facilitate and encourage electric vehicle usage by all our employees, and we encourage carpooling as well. We are currently funding a University of Wisconsin research project that studies reduced water and input usage on kidney beans. The main goal of this research is to improve the health of groundwater aquifers in areas where they are threatened. Beyond our activities focused on environmental impacts, we are also working to be sustainable with our workforce and in our community. New employees start at a minimum of $17 an hour, which is over twice the federal minimum and above the national goal of $15 an hour. All of our full-time staff are eligible for a comprehensive benefit package, which includes health insurance, a 401k retirement plan with a 4% company match, voluntary dental and vision coverage, complimentary life insurance, and both short-term and long-term disability policies. Our employees are also offered paid time off to spend with family and friends. In our community, we're especially focused on making sure everyone has access to healthy foods. Working with local food banks, we're donating over 1.5 tons of kidney beans every month to make sure that those that need it can feed their families a highly nutritious meal every day. We have also set up a matching donation program for our staff. This means that any donations our employees make to a federally certified nonprofit will be matched at an equal amount by Chippewa Valley Bean, doubling the impact of any gift. Finally, we run a holiday matching program for all of our growers. Starting with a base donation of $5,000, Chippewa Valley Bean matches any amount given by our growers to selected organizations. In the past, these donations have built a school in Haiti, provided hundreds of school kits for students in refugee camps, and provided thousands of meals for those who are hungry.
Sustainability shouldn't be just part of our work. It needs to be a guiding influence for all of our work. And we must strive to achieve a sustainability state of mind that permeates all aspects of our day-to-day lives in local, national, and international domains. Sustainability should encourage business to frame decisions in terms of environmental, social, and human impact for the long term, not just for short-term gains such as next quarter's earnings report.
Okay, thank you very much. It's amazing to see just how many sustainable initiatives you're implementing. Could I ask just if you were to give any tips to anyone who wanted to start sustainable crop management systems, what would you say? What would you provide?
Well, I think that on the crop management systems, if we go to our universities that provide a huge amount of information and are working more towards sustainability with many new programs, we'd find that there's a lot of information that can be shared. I think the one thing that's really important as we look at the production side of the operation is that as we've taken many of the same genetics and seed for a long number of years, and we've watched the yields increase per acre, which has been truly based on growers' management and their management of environmental practices, of rotation, of cover crops, of fine-tuning their crop inputs. I think that's made a huge difference. On the plant side, we've found that our buyers, people like Bush Brothers and our other customers, have said to us, sustainability is very important. What are you doing in your operation? What is your carbon footprint? How will you achieve a zero carbon goal in the short term? So it's all along the supply chain.
It's interesting also, we'll get to Bush Brothers now, but it's interesting to see just how the true supply chain we have on the stage right now, from growing to canning. So maybe we can just pass this to you before we get to the Q&A session. So thank you, Cindy. I appreciate the sharing, and we can get into Q&A afterwards. Our next guest speaker is the Director of External Affairs and Sustainability at Bush Brothers and Company. Please welcome Steve Saville.
Yes. All right, thank you. Perfect. So it's great to hang out with you guys this afternoon, and thank you so very much, Max. Thank you for that intro. And it feels really nice here in this conversation today because we work really closely with Scott and his team at Michigan State. We are a longtime customer of Cindy and her organization. Her father and one of our chairmen, worked together back in the 60s to really put this thing together. So part of what we're getting into today is really to talk a little bit about what does sustainability mean to Bush Brothers. And I'm going to just sort of jump right straight into maybe the next. All right, there's some of our products. There you go. All right, so Bush Brothers is a U.S.-based company. We're about 115 years old. On the screen is our founder, who started this organization back in 1908 in East Tennessee. So those folks that are familiar with the geography of the United States, we're in the Smoky Mountains, so we have a beautiful location that we get to hang out and call home. And what's really kind of important for us, Bush Brothers is the leading canner of dry beans in the United States, and about 1/3 of all beans that are sold in the U.S., have a Bush Brothers label, on that. Bush Brothers is still a family-owned company. And I say that, and that's really important because we believe in kind of the perpetuity of the organization. I am not family. I really wish that after 30 years, somehow or other, I could have gotten adopted into the company, but that's just not happened so far. But it still has that very close family connection, and that we all feel really very blessed to be part of this organization. So my role allows me to connect with a lot of different organizations, and therefore I get to have a lot of fun talking to a lot of the people that are in this room, obviously some of the folks that are on the stage today. But some of the things that we really want to get into is to talk about sustainability and maybe how that also applies to where you guys sit. So I'm going to jump ahead. Let's go one more slide here. Okay, so Bush Brothers is motivated to talk about sustainability because there's some things that we think are really important from our own value system. but there's also expectations that are made upon us from our customers. Some of the items that you see on the screen right here are just an example of what customers, so for us in the United States, you may be thinking about Ahold or Walmart or Kroger, but those are the organizations that are coming to Bush Brothers and they're asking me questions that I cannot answer. They are asking me questions about what happens inside of our production facilities as far as greenhouse gases, electricity, our water usage, but they're also asking me very specific questions that really I have no answer for. And some of these things that you may see on the screen here, they're asking me about labor practices at the farm level. They're asking me about soil erosion. They're asking me about water irrigation. So when Cindy and her team start talking about what they're doing from a water management standpoint, that's exactly the kinds of questions that we ask because that's the kind of question that we're getting at. So that's a really good partnership that they've been able to put together for us and helping us understand. Also, what's happening in the U.S., and some of this is also happening in the EU, there are financial obligations, or there's in the case of the United States, the Security and Exchange Commission are really pushing on public companies to answer these very specific environmental questions. So again, a Walmart, who is a publicly held company, is going to ask Bush Brothers, who is a family-based company, about what we're doing to improve our environmental footprint or our carbon footprint. And then in a lot of cases, then I have to go ask Cindy, or I have to ask a number of you guys to help me understand what does that mean. So we're all connected through this work. So that is customer expectations. We also have another expectation from a customer standpoint is the fact that our customers, our consumers are actually expecting us to take a lead. There is some belief that large companies are responsible for some of the environmental challenges that are out there. So the expectation is the larger companies are also expected to help address and, in some cases, fix that problem. So that's what's going out there. We do have studies that tell us that our consumers are asking about farmers. They're asking about what companies like Bush Brothers are doing. Well, how are we improving, again, our footprint? And we have marketers that are looking to find some way to share that story with the consumer who is asking us about that. We're even having candidates that will come into our organizations that we're looking to hire, and they're asking, what are you guys doing about environment? What is your sustainability practice? What are your social and governance practices? So we're actually getting those kinds of questions from potential new hires. And again, this goes all the way back to you guys. We are partnering together on this. We consider ourselves to be really an agricultural company. I mean, we're a marketer. We put products in a can. We put them on a grocery store shelf. But at the end of the day, without the material and the sourcing of product that you provide, there is no way for us to be able to be in business. So we too are an agricultural company. So it's really important that we work together on all of this. So for Bush Brothers, it is all about the bean. We are totally focused on what can we do, what can we put into the marketplace, and how can we, in a sense, make the world better, because we really believe that the product adds something to us as consumers. So if I eat the product, it's good for me. It's good for the planet, and therefore there's just so many positives around that. Now I'm going to switch to a video. This is a video that we just recently put on our website. We also have it in our visitor center, but it's just kind of a way to encapsulate, how we think about sustainability in kind of a nice, friendly way for the consumer. But I'm not sure how to start it.
At Bush Brothers & Company, we've been devoted to the humble little bean for generations, and we want to share that legacy of legume love for generations to come. So here's a glimpse of what we've been working on, a pinto peek at the world of bean goodness. See, it starts in the ground. Beans already do their part returning nitrogen to the soil, and we're following their lead to process and distribute them using best practices, from cannellini to can. Beans bring people together from all generations and cultures across the world. And in our world, there's always room for one more at the table. It's a world built around good business decisions that scale to our communities. we're always looking for ways to reuse and recycle, from infinitely recyclable steel cans to our water reuse facility and reducing our natural gas use. But the true purpose is to simply add a little more goodness every day, one bean at a time, because it's the right thing to do. Now do you see why we're bean obsessed? Because it's how we'll keep delivering our best, for people, for planet, for goodness sake. At Bush's, we are that beautiful bean company.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting that you get asked these questions quite regularly. Before we take this to, before I ask you another question, actually, I'd like to ask the audience, because that reflects your presentation. It's directed to any Colombian retailers in the audience. Have you asked your manufacturers about sustainable crop management systems? If so, what responses have you had? Any hands would be greatly appreciated.
While
Hola, hola.
maybe ask. Oh, wait.
Alguien que esté en el segmento de supermercado que pueda contestar esta pregunta
At Bush Brothers and Company,
del panel. It seems that nobody could answer this question, so
Well, this was really interesting, and Max and I were talking about this yesterday, because there are some very specific surveys that we are asked to complete, and in some cases it is a retailer that is really calling that out and asking us, and they're talking about, again, irrigation, they're talking about soil erosion, they're talking about very specific on the farm, kinds of areas, and so that's the push we're getting. And again, I was just kind of curious to see if that's also happening here, because that's what's driving us to do these things and move in this direction.
I think it's even more than just our farming practices. We come back to, you talked briefly about how we treat our employees and what our practices are, and that side of it. It's the whole SMETA audit aspect.
So it's interesting that no one's been asked or had that question asked before. So are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask our esteemed guests today based on their presentations?
¿alguna otra pregunta que alguien tenga con respecto a esta presentación y panel? Por allá. Okay.
We definitely have time for a few questions.
Hi there, it's Alison Greenhalgh-Ball, or AGB, and I'm here representing, I think Beans is how, really. And so you talked about the retailers being a powerful lever for change. What other powerful levers for change are on the table right now? And I'm thinking about the investor community. So I think they're a critical gatekeeper. As soon as the investor community starts to move beyond, just quarterly results, looking at kind of sustainable kind of business over the medium term, we start to really have meaningful action. So I'd love your views on the role of the investor here.
So from an investor standpoint, it's very interesting. Again, as a privately held company, we don't have those direct questions coming at us about what our sustainability practices are. However, our customers are doing that, and even some of the financial institutions that we're working with. So even if we're working with our banking, they may be asking questions specifically to us. So that is more recent, kind of push on us, but it is a very kind of a legitimate, kind of business. It's a risk management exercise that we have to go through that we had not had as part of our process before.
And I'll echo that as well. So our company is much smaller in size, but when we look at the financial organizations that we work with, there's oftentimes questions on, what are you doing? How are you managing this? But more so, they're also educating us. I would say that there's usually a quarterly seminar on sustainability and how that's being driven. And we're seeing it through multiple financial organizations.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have a hand at the back. Incoming microphone.
Hi, I'm Dee Richmond with the U.S. Dry Bean Council. And I have a question for Max. Max is from Thailand and is part of forming a vegan community and stuff like that. So Max, when I first started talking to you about this conference and stuff like that, I thought maybe the reason that a lot of young people were eating dry beans was because of their health benefits and because they're becoming more vegan and stuff like that. But then you and Johanna started talking to me about sustainability and the way that you viewed it. And I almost got the impression that sustainability was more important than some of the nutritional benefits and promoting to some of the younger generations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, of course. I think that health is obviously a huge aspect of getting people interested in a change of diet or consuming more beans specifically. But we, as Root the Future in Thailand, we run an organization where we sort of promote a change of diet towards more of a plant-forward or plant-centric way of eating, so incorporating much more plants into your diet. And that is essentially to we're trying to show how climate, how this change of diet can improve your footprint. So for us, I think that sustainability or beans, when in terms of sustainability, that's more of a gateway drug towards a diet change. So in terms of health, there's a lot that can be discussed, but that's definitely for an older generation. The younger generation are much more interested in climate change. I think the Beans is How guys have probably the reason why they got involved with in their business is through sustainability and through the sustainable aspect of beans. But from Thailand, there are lots of different aspects. We run lots of different campaigns that we try to do lots of different campaigns that have different avenues. One could be health, one could be animal related, one could be climate related. And we do find that the younger generation, and this is from say 24, 35 or 18 to 35, are definitely more interested in more sustainability rather than health. That's purely from Thailand, but it is interesting to see other studies that have been done about this worldwide. I think that there has been a study done recently that in the US that is definitely more centered towards health from 24 to 35. But yeah, Thailand definitely the gateway drug towards diet change is definitely towards climate change.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Any other question?
Could I ask Scott a question?
Sure.
Scott, you were talking about that spray system that was just kind of like point and shoot. And you had commented yesterday when we were talking about a system that eventually may be able to go through the field and it's a full field that's canopied over and still have some weeds that are coming up and be able to come through and isolate those weeds and hit them with a shot of crop protection chemicals. So how do farmers pay for that? Sounds expensive.
Right, and that is an excellent question, and that is truth. When we look at the cost of ag technology, it's not getting any cheaper. I haven't gotten a quote on a new sprayer lately, but I'm guessing you're approaching $500,000 before you talk about all this additional technology that's we're talking about in the future. But where that return on investment really comes from is our scale. So if we're able to cover enough acres with a machine like that and able to save enough product, by really cutting down on our input cost, year in, year out, we'll end up eventually having a return on that investment while also helping protect our environment and put less synthetic chemicals into that system. So really, it's kind of part of that long-term approach to sustainability, both from the economic and environmental side. But that is a challenge to start. The input costs are high.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? I'm not sure if we actually have time, so let's wrap it up there. Okay, thank you very much.